Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Kendra Maurer. I am one of the Cadet Wing Dietitians, and I'm happy to be presenting you a variety of topics. This was requested by one of the groups. So today I'll be talking about macronutrients with a special emphasis on what happens if I don't get in enough of each, the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of alcohol, nutritional considerations for living at a higher altitude, some pros and cons of several popular fad diets, and what to look for in an eating disorder and where to find help. So let's jump right in with macronutrients. You're probably familiar with the three main macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Macro meaning your body needs these in large amounts. What you may not know is that fiber, water, and overall energy are also considered macronutrients, and we'll be talking about each one of these. So carbohydrates are your preferred energy source for your body. Even at rest, your body requires a constant stream of carbohydrate energy, which is turned into glucose. Carbohydrate is used as a fuel during exercise with fat. And you can see on this graph that as your exercise intensity increases, as measured by VO2 max, the percentage of energy coming from carbohydrate also increases. And getting in enough carbohydrate helps to spare your protein, especially during exercise. Carbohydrates are found in a variety of food sources: grains, fruits, starchy vegetables, dairy, and any food that has any added sugar in it. We want to aim to get in carbohydrates from quality food sources, so that's going to be the top 4 choices there, and limit our intake of refined grains and added sugars. So what happens if you don't eat enough carbohydrate? You may get hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. This results when insufficient carbohydrate intake. Symptoms include shakiness, extreme hunger, confusion, and headache. This is more of a problem for people who suffer from diabetes, but some people do suffer from symptoms of hypoglycemia, also known as being very hangry. Fatigue is an issue when you don't eat enough carbohydrates, since carbohydrates are your body's preferred energy source. You'll also find that your workouts may start to suffer because you don't have enough energy. And additionally, if your body doesn't have a steady stream of readily available carbohydrate, it'll switch to using both muscle and fat for energy instead of carbs, so that may cause you to lose muscle mass. A lot of carbs, especially the quality carbs, contain fiber, and if you're not getting in enough of that, you may suffer with constipation. Another benefit of the fiber in carbohydrate is it helps to induce satiety, and so if you're not getting in enough carbohydrate, you may not feel satisfied after eating. And if you're really severely limiting carbohydrate intake, you may end up in what's called ketosis. We'll talk a little bit more about this during the fad diet, because that's what the keto diet does as a means to try and reduce weight. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during the fad diet section. So let's talk about protein. Protein is really important for our tissues. It's part of our organs, part of our muscles, our skin and hair, our ligaments, even in our blood. Proteins are a part of our cell plasma membranes. Proteins are an important part of our metabolic, transport, and hormone systems. They're part of enzymes that help to regulate metabolism, and they help to assist our body with acid-base balance. Protein needs do vary depending on your activity level. You can see that sedentary adults don't need quite as much protein as individuals who are very active athletes, and so you'll want to plan accordingly with your protein intake. Protein can be found in a variety of food sources. We find protein in animal meats like chicken and turkey, fish, shellfish, beef, lamb, and wild game. We find protein in dairy products and eggs, in nuts and seeds, whole grains, legumes, and soy products such as soy milk and tofu. So what happens if I don't get in enough protein? Well, there is the potential for loss of muscle mass. We see people suffering from weak hair and weak nails. We see individuals who don't get in enough protein be hungry, because hunger or protein does help to satisfy hunger and keep us full longer. We see slower healing from injuries, impaired immune system, more frequent sickness, and increased risk of stress fractures. As a side note, most Americans do get in enough protein. What we typically see, though, is that a lot of people eat lighter breakfasts and lunches and then a large dinner, and so you're getting most of your protein intake at dinner. Ideally, what we'd like to see is that protein intake spread more throughout the day. So starting your day off with a nice breakfast that has some protein in it. Anywhere between 20 and 40 grams is ideal, and this is because your body can only utilize so much protein at any given time, so we do like to see that protein intake spread throughout the day. There is one population that does sometimes fall short on protein, and that is our vegetarian population. And this is because most plant proteins do not contain all 9 essential amino acids, and plant protein is not absorbed as readily as animal-based proteins. And so vegetarians, and especially vegans, may need to aim for a higher overall protein amount in order to meet protein needs. It's not exceptionally more high, but it is just a little bit higher. And the best way, if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, you're going to want to aim to get in a variety of plant-based protein sources every single day. One thing to note is soy protein, which is a plant protein, does actually contain all 9 essential amino acids, and so that is almost just the same as eating an animal protein in terms of the nutrients that it provides. So let's talk about fat. Fat is important. It's an energy reserve, helps to protect our vital organs and insulate us from extreme temperatures. Fat in our diet helps to transport fat-soluble vitamins. It produces and regulates our hormones. For example, leptin is produced by our body's fat cells, which helps to regulate our appetite. Fat also helps to support our reproductive health, especially in females. Fat contributes to the smell, taste, and satiety of foods, and provides us with essential fatty acids like omega-3s and omega-6s. Do note that there are some differences in fat, and we'd like to encourage you to eat more of the healthy types of fat and less of the unhealthy types. So the healthy types are going to be unsaturated fats, polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated. Those are going to be found more in like olive oil, canola oil, nuts and seeds, fatty fishes like salmon and tuna, and avocado. You're going to want to try and limit your source of animal fats because those are higher in the saturated fats. So things like bacon, fatty cuts of meat, and dairy products like cheese, heavy cream, and butter. And then anything that contains trans fats or hydrogenated oils, try to avoid those as best as possible. Again, food sources of fat, mostly in oils, butter, and margarine. Those are going to be your added fats. And then some foods just naturally are high in fats, and those are going to be your nuts, seeds, avocados, some dairy products, some meats, and some fish. So what happens if you don't eat enough fats? Well, you could potentially become vitamin deficient. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat-soluble vitamins. For example, if you ate a spinach salad and you didn't put any salad dressing on there that had some healthy fats or any nuts and seeds, potentially you might not be able to absorb the vitamin K that is in the spinach. A sign of vitamin E and vitamin K deficiency is dry, scaly skin. This can happen pretty frequently. If you had no fat for only 2 to 3 weeks, you might see that your skin starts to become dry and flaky. We see slow wound healing, hair loss, weakened immune system. You may be hungry if you aren't getting in enough fat. Sometimes we do see increased inflammation when you don't eat enough fat, and that's typically because now you're getting in more calories, usually from carbohydrate and potentially from refined grains or sugars. And we know that high amounts of those can induce inflammation. In females, we see reduced reproductive ability. So in the grand scheme of things, with the 3 main macros, we like to see fat intake at about 20 to 35% of total calories, protein 10 to 35%, and carbohydrates 45 to 65%. There's really no need to panic about trying to figure out how to balance out your diet. If you are eating a variety of foods every day in a variety of food groups, at least 2 at every time you're eating, this macronutrient breakdown works out really nicely just on its own. So let's talk about fiber. So fiber is a type of carbohydrate that our digestive system isn't able to break down. It's found in a variety of foods such as fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, whole grains, and nuts and seeds. It's important because it helps to regulate our body weight, it helps to control our blood sugar levels, reduce cholesterol, and it lowers the risks of certain types of cancer. And why this is considered a macronutrient is because it's needed in quite large amounts throughout the day. Females should aim to eat at least 25 grams of fiber daily, and males should aim to eat at least 38 grams of fiber daily. Most Americans do fall short in this arena. Do know that there are 2 types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber dissolves in water, and as it dissolves, it creates a gel that may improve digestion. It also may reduce blood cholesterol and blood sugar levels. Good food sources of soluble fiber include oatmeal, beans, and apples. Insoluble fiber does not dissolve in water. It does help to bulk up your stool and makes it easier to pass a stool. And good sources of insoluble fiber include anything made with whole wheat, brown rice, and carrots. Do note that most foods are a combination of both soluble and insoluble fibers, but just in slightly different combinations. So what happens if you don't get enough fiber? Well, initially, the biggest concern is constipation. So if you are suffering from constipation, one thing you can try is to increase your daily intake of fiber. Do note that if you do increase your fiber intake, increase your water intake as well. The big effects of lack of fiber intake are generally going to be down the road. So we see issues with chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. We also see increased risks of certain types of cancer like breast cancer, as well as diverticular disease. And that's what this slide is showing. It's just those little pouches kind of that are on the side of the colon. They think this is due to lack of fiber and constant constipation. And so it's not really a big deal. Like, you never even know if you have these little pouches, but every once in a while they do become inflamed, and it can be quite painful if that happens. Fluid is also considered a macronutrient because we do need these in large amounts every single day. Dehydration of as little as 2% of your body weight can negatively affect your athletic performance. So you're going to want to focus on drinking fluids throughout the day. If you are exercising, pay special attention to the times before, during, and after exercise. Make sure you're starting off as hydrated as possible. For any exercise lasting less than an hour, water is going to be just fine. If you are exercising more than an hour, that's when like a sports drink may be beneficial. You can also just eat some fruits and vegetables and drink water during exercise, and that would provide you with plenty of electrolytes as well. I know some people do struggle with drinking enough water, so some tips to help you stay hydrated include carry a water bottle with you always so that it's easy to have, and then you can refill it when you need to. If you're having trouble remembering to drink, there are several apps out there that you can download, and they will send you a reminder to drink at whatever time frame that you set it. So whether it's every hour, every 2 hours, you can do that. If you're somebody that really doesn't like the taste of water, you can flavor it to make it more appealing. One of the best ways to tell if you're hydrated is by keeping track of the color of your urine. We want it to be a light, pale yellow color. If it's a dark yellow, or even like an amber or brown color, then you're definitely dehydrated and need to focus on drinking more. Overall energy is also considered a macronutrient because this is something that we need in large volumes daily to maintain our vital functions, to maintain our activities of daily living. So that's, walking back and forth to classes, making your bed, and for any physical activity that we're doing. Taking in adequate amounts of energy helps us to perform our best in and out of the classroom. You can see that carbohydrates and protein provide 4 calories per gram. Fat is more nutrient dense, it provides 9 calories per gram. Some signs that you may not be getting in enough total energy include fatigue, hair loss, if you're constantly hungry, if you're not sleeping well, if you're irritable, if you're cold all the time, if you're feeling anxious. Those can definitely be signs of not taking in enough. Sometimes we see people losing weight unintentionally, and other times we see a reduced metabolic rate, especially if you're not eating enough. Your body tries to conserve as much energy as possible. So the best way to meet all of our macronutrient needs are carbohydrates, protein, fat, fiber, fluids, and total energy is just to eat as balanced as possible. Every day obviously is not going to be perfect, but we want to make sure we're trying to eat a variety of food groups every time we're eating, every single day. You can see here we want to focus on lean proteins, vegetables, whole grains. We want to make sure we're eating fruit, we're eating healthy fats, and that we're taking in enough fluids every single day through mostly water and unsweetened drinks, but occasional tea, coffee, milk, and juice as needed as well. All right, moving on. Depressant, sorry, let me go back there, meaning that our vital functions slow down. So we see slurred speech, unsteady movement, lack of rational thought, and slowed breathing and slowed heart rate. And obviously the amount of alcohol consumed will determine the extent of the effects. So what happens when you drink alcohol? Well, once you swallow alcohol, it is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream and moves to all parts of the body. So it starts with absorption in your mouth, a small amount, and then in your stomach, up to 20% of it can pass through the stomach directly into the bloodstream. Kind of depends on how much food you have in your stomach. But the majority of alcohol is absorbed in your small intestine. And you can feel the effects of alcohol immediately, and that's because a small amount does get absorbed right away into your mouth and stomach. But it doesn't reach its peak effect until about 30 to 90 minutes after drinking. The liver is your only organ that's primarily responsible for breaking down alcohol, and on average can break down about 1 standard drink per hour. This does vary due to genetic differences. So a standard drink, let's talk about what that is. A standard drink is 12 fluid ounces of regular beer at about 5% alcohol. It's 8 to 9 fluid ounces of malt liquor or a higher alcohol percentage beer. It's 5 fluid ounces of wine or 1.5 ounces of distilled liquor. Moderate drinking is considered to be 1 standard drink per day for women or 2 standard drinks per day for men. Binge drinking is drinking 5 or more drinks if you're a man or 4 or more drinks if you're a woman at any given occasion. And heavy alcohol use is defined as 8 drinks or more per week for women and 15 or more drinks per week for men, or binge drinking 5 or more times in the past month. For health reasons, we'd like you to stick with the moderate drinking. There are some people who should just avoid drinking altogether, or times that you may want to avoid drinking. So if you're planning on driving or participating in any sort of activity that requires a skill, coordination, or alertness. Some prescription medications do interfere with alcohol, so make sure you check if you're taking anything. Certain medical conditions, it's recommended not to drink. If you suffer from alcohol use disorder, if you're younger than 21 years old, and in the future, if you ever try to become pregnant or you are pregnant, avoiding alcohol is recommended. So anything above a 0.30 is going to be life-threatening. So if you're a female and let's say you weigh 140 pounds, if you had 8 or 9 drinks, you would be in that range of life-threatening. If you are at a party or if you're somewhere and you do notice somebody who has lost consciousness or isn't breathing very well, do seek medical attention. So there are risks to drinking. Short term, we see increased risk of injury from motor vehicle crashes, falls, drownings, and burns. We see increased risk of violence, including homicide, suicide, sexual assault, and intimate partner violence. You could potentially get alcohol poisoning, which often requires medical attention. You have increased risk of risky behavior, such as unprotected sex. You may suffer from a hangover, which can just make you feel terrible and reduce your productivity. Alcohol can make you sleepy, but it does not help you sleep. It actually interferes with your deep sleep, so you might not be as rested the next day. And some people feel a slight anxiety or depression after a night of drinking. If you continue to drink, some long-term effects include heart damage, liver damage, pancreas damage. It does put you at increased risks of certain types of cancers, such as head and neck cancer. We do see weakened immune systems. People suffer from poor memory, dementia, and poor school performance. We see family and other social problems, unemployment, and lost productivity. And we do see increased risk of mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. We do know that for some people, having a drink or two can be quite relaxing and enjoyable, especially when you're out with friends. So let's talk about how to drink responsibly. So first of all, you're going to need to know your limit and plan ahead. You're always going to want to eat something before you drink and during if you can. Pace yourself, sip your drinks. Have something non-alcoholic such as water or soda or some juice or something in between your alcoholic drinks. Be aware of any unfamiliar drinks and their potential alcohol content, especially if you have not had a lot to drink yet in your life. Just be aware that certain drinks may affect you a little bit differently. Do not ever accept drinks from a stranger. If you don't want to get drunk, I would avoid drinking games. Always, if you're out, designate a sober driver and definitely respect the rights of anyone who does not wish to drink, especially your sober driver. If you don't have a sober driver, before you go out, download the Uber or a Lyft app. It may seem expensive at the time sometimes to take one of those, but it's definitely cheaper and more safe than a DUI. If you are going to drink with your friends that you trust, just in case something does happen. And the only thing that's going to help with sobering you up is time. You have to give your liver time to break down all the alcohol that has been consumed. Coffee and cold showers and exercise and extra food, etc., don't really work to sober somebody up. So the bottom line, the effects of alcohol are wide-ranging. They can be beneficial all the way to detrimental. We know that drinking small amounts, that moderate drinking, 1 drink for women and 2 drink for men every day, doesn't seem to cause any long-term negative health effects. But alcohol does affect everyone differently. So if it is causing problems in your life, or if you find in the future it is, it may be best to avoid alcohol. There are lots of places to get help. I put down one website link there, but feel free to check out other resources as well. And it is a group approach to helping people who struggle with alcohol use disorder. All right, we're going to switch topics again. We're going to talk about altitude and how that might affect us nutritionally. You can see this chart here, and it's got several mountain ranges on it. The one at the very bottom there in Alberta, I'm not sure how to say that, Yamnuska, that elevation right there is basically the exact same as the Cadet area here at USAFA. So we are considered to be at high altitude. You can see some of these mountains here getting into the very high altitude and extreme altitude. So you may find yourself in the mountains of Colorado at some point in the very, very high altitude range. So recommendations for high altitude nutrition include maintaining adequate hydration, and that's because at altitude we do tend to suffer from higher rates of dehydration. And that's because the humidity here is lower and it increases our fluid losses. The best way to determine your hydration level, as I mentioned previously, is to keep an eye on your urine color. You can see in this chart here that we want it to be like a pale yellow color, ideally. Any sort of like bright yellow or darker yellow or even like apple juice color is not good. And so if you do get into the range where it's a dark color, you may want to seek medical attention, but otherwise just keep an eye on that and make sure you're drinking enough fluids while you're here. When you get to elevation, your iron needs initially do increase. And so I know when you guys first came to USAFA, they do screen you for iron deficiency and keep an eye on it. And a handful of you, I'm sure, ended up on iron supplementation. That does get better with time. It just takes a little bit of time for your body to get acclimated and start producing an increased number of red blood cells. When we get into really high elevations, like that very high elevation, we do see increased metabolism, and sometimes we do see decreased appetite. And so you want to keep that in mind, especially if you're, like, let's say you're up in the mountains skiing. You do want to make sure you're eating consistently throughout the day, at least 3 meals, and then 1 to 3 snacks is needed. And people who are going to try and be active at altitude, like skiing, or if you're doing any sort of other physical activity, may benefit from increased carbohydrate intake. Oxidative stress is increased at higher altitudes, which may impair cell and immune function, and in some cases potentially delay post-exercise recovery. So to help combat this, intake of foods rich in antioxidants is important. So you want to eat a variety of colorful fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins daily. And we know that sleep can be affected at altitude as well. You know, our breathing patterns change, and it can make restful sleep more difficult. And so some tips to help with sleep are you're going to want to avoid caffeine, alcohol, and large meals right before bed. Some things that might help include herbal tea, tart cherry juice, and just a very light bedtime snack. All right, we're going to change gears again and talk about fad diets. And I listed a couple of them here: paleo, macro counting, keto, intermittent fasting, and juice cleanses. These are just a few that I've heard cadets mention or just kind of are out in the popular media. There's tons of others. These are just the ones I was going to focus on today. So fad diets, they're called fad diets for a reason. At best, they're not useful for long-term weight loss, and at worst, they can severely jeopardize your health. So the paleo diet is, its premise is to eat like a caveman, only meats, seafood, eggs, nuts, seeds, fruits, berries, and non-starchy vegetables like spinach and broccoli, as well as plant-based oils. This diet avoids all dairy, grains of all kinds, including oats, wheat, barley, rice, cereal, breads, beans, legumes, including peanuts, and starchy vegetables like potatoes, as well as sugars and other processed foods. So pros of this diet: you're cutting out processed food, which is always a good thing. You have higher intakes of fats and protein, which can help with satiety. And oftentimes people do see weight loss, and that's due to limited food choices. But cons, you are eliminating many food groups, possibly running the risk of a micronutrient deficiency. Of most concern would be B vitamins and calcium, and then potentially lack of not enough fiber, unless you are eating high amounts of fruits and vegetables. Also, for this particular diet, there's really no guidelines on portion sizes. For athletes, this diet may be problematic because it may not provide adequate amounts of carbohydrate to support physical activity. And paleo can be quite expensive because there's a lot of specific paleo marketed products, and they are not very cheap. So macro counting, or counting macros, this just literally translates into counting the number of grams of carbohydrates, protein, and fat that is consumed daily in order to optimize body weight and composition. Most people on this diet do weigh their foods. It's seen commonly in bodybuilding communities. So pros to this diet: it does bring awareness to what you are eating. It's more balanced than simply counting calories. And no foods are really off limits as long as you're meeting your macro goals. But some of the cons is it doesn't account for food quality, so it could be low in micronutrients if you're limiting any sort of intake of fruits, vegetables, or healthy fat sources. It can lead to excessively strict habits and promote disordered eating. And it does not provide flexibility if you are hungry, for example, and it can be quite time consuming, especially if you're trying to weigh out all of your food. So the keto diet, this is the one we talked about a little bit earlier. This severely restricts your carbohydrate intake in order to shift the body's energy supply from its preferred source, which is glucose, to ketones, which is what the body uses when it's desperate and it doesn't have enough glucose. You may or may not have known this, but the keto diet was originally developed as a medical diet to help children who suffer from epileptic seizures. And the children who do suffer from seizures and follow this diet see really excellent improvement in their seizures, almost to the point where the seizures do go away. And somewhere along the way, it became a trendy weight loss diet. So a typical daily intake on the keto diet sees only about 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate, and it's mostly in the form of things like berries and non-starchy vegetables like lettuce. The goal is to aim to get in about 25% of your calories from protein, 5% or less from carbohydrate, and about 75% or so has to come from fat. So, the pros on this diet: there's no processed foods. People do experience improvements in their insulin sensitivity and blood glucose levels. That's more so if you are suffering from diabetes. And that's about it for the pros. Cons: it's very restrictive, it's hard to maintain, it's very high in fat, and there's really no limit on saturated fat intake. This diet is often high in butter, cheese, and other unhealthy fat sources. It's low in fiber, low in micronutrients. If you have any sort of existing liver problems, could exacerbate that problem just due to the high fat intake. There's potentially too much protein, leading to kidney issues. Could have low energy, and there are mixed results when it comes to weight loss. And as of now, we don't have any long-term studies on the safety and the long-term effectiveness of the keto diet. The intermittent fasting diet, this is the one that I probably hear the most about with cadets. It can support weight loss through severe calorie restriction. So some people fast for 1 to 2 days per week, and some people fast for specific periods of time during the day. So there are some pros to the intermittent fasting diet. There's a lot of promising research studies on the benefits of this for weight loss. These studies, though, have been done in obese rats. There's not as many studies done in humans. And the studies that are done in humans do show weight loss, but it's because of calorie restriction, and it's really no better than any other diet. For example, if you were to just reduce your calories slightly every day. So the cons of this diet: it can be hard for some people to fast. It can actually lead to weight gain, because once you're allowed to eat, some people do eat a little bit too much. It can increase fatigue and moodiness. For some people, skipping meals can cause headaches, dizziness, and nausea. And the real reason I don't really like the intermittent fasting diet for the particular population up at USAFA is because it's really not a great diet for athletes or anybody who is participating in any sort of physical activity. You can suffer from poor workouts, poor recovery, and you do see some loss of muscle mass because you aren't supporting that muscle mass with regular protein intake throughout the day. So the last fad diet I want to mention is the juice cleanse. This is a trendy detox diet that involves only drinking juice for 1 to 3 days and up to 10 days. And proponents of juicing claim that juicing makes it easier for your body to absorb nutrients, and that it provides a detox process by clearing out the diet of sugar, caffeine, refined foods, etc. So pros: you may and you most likely might lose weight temporarily, but this is very rarely long lasting. And there are a lot of cons. It's low in calories, there's no protein, you could suffer from fatigue, low blood sugar levels, moodiness. Something that juicing does is it takes out all the fiber of the actual, like let's say it's an apple. You're much better off just eating the apple versus drinking the juice. The concept of detoxing is really just a marketing ploy. There's no evidence that a detox diet actually removes toxins from your body. That is why you have a liver and kidneys. Those organs already break down and remove waste every single day for you. So it's important to remember that anything, whether it be a diet or a product that offers quick weight loss results, is usually too good to be true. If you're looking to eat healthier and you aren't sure where to start, reach out to us, to myself or to my colleague Jason Olig anytime. Our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. We'd be happy to meet with you and talk to you about your individual nutrient needs and concerns. So really quickly, I just want to mention eating disorders. I feel like this could be a presentation that could last an hour all on its own. What I want you to know is that eating disorders can affect people of all ages, all ethnic and all racial backgrounds, body weights, and genders. And people with eating disorders may appear healthy, but they're actually very, very sick. And the exact cause of an eating disorder really is not fully understood, but it's thought to be a combination of genetic, biological, behavioral, psychological, and social factors that play together to form an eating disorder. So some things to keep an eye on, either in yourself, maybe a roommate or a friend, anyone who frequently diets, has anxiety associated with specific foods or skips meals. If you see someone with chronic weight fluctuations, they have very rigid rituals and routines surrounding food and exercise. If there's any feelings of guilt or shame associated with eating. There's a preoccupation with food, weight, or body image that negatively impacts quality of life. There's a feeling of loss of control around food, including compulsive eating habits. If you're using exercise, food restriction, or fasting or purging for making up bad foods consumed. This is just a short list of what to look for. Here at USAFA, we have a team. It's the CHEW team, or the Cadet Healthy Eating and Wellness team, that works specifically with people with eating disorders and disordered eating. So those are individuals who maybe don't meet the full criteria, but this still affects their daily life. So you can reach out to anybody on this list. Myself, my colleague Jason Olig, our athletic department dietitian. The Peak Performance Center has mental health specialists who can help with some of the counseling aspect. And we do have adolescent medicine specialists who, exactly as it sounds, help to work with this population who do struggle with some of these issues. So early intervention and a team approach is definitely the best way to go. Do feel free, if you feel like you or a friend needs help, please do reach out. And that's all I have today. I thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to present to you on a variety of topics. I know it was a lot of information. So if you do have questions, feel free to email or call, or if you'd like to set up an appointment with one of us, we'd love to see you. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.